Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Larry Lursey. Welcome back to the channel. I've got a cool video for you today. I don't know how many of you use supplemental equipment when you're doing Photoshop work, like a Wacom tablet and things like that. I use a tablet along with my keyboard is my kind of general setup, but I've been thinking about getting one of these standalone boxes that you use kind of with your other hand that has shortcut keys and knobs and things like that on it. And I was thinking about getting one, and then out of the blue I heard from the people at Tourbox who actually sent this to me to try out, and I thought this would be a great time to take a look at what is inside this thing. I'm going to set it up and try and use it for a little bit and get used to it, and then I'm going to report back to you and let you know, was it any good? Did I like it? I'm anticipating a little bit of a learning curve if it's anything like using the tablet, but we'll see. So first of all, let's see what comes in the box. And this is the Neo Tourbox. So we will open it up. While I'm doing this, if you haven't already done so, please make sure you subscribe. I don't know if you've been checking on the status of my challenge lately of trying to reach 1 billion subscribers, but as you can tell from the chart there, I'm still a little short of the goal, so still working toward it. But if you need something to do while I'm opening this box, go ahead and hit subscribe. But anyways, back to this. So let's check out the Tourbox. The little bit of instructions here and a little thing we've got to open to reveal the Tourbox. Actually, got one more bag to open. So, here we go. And there it is. As you can see, it's got a whole bunch of little knobs and buttons that can be programmed to do whatever it is we want it to do. So, should be interesting. It's pretty small, but it feels kind of solid. I'll be very anxious to see how this gets incorporated in the workflow. Kind of one of the problems when you've been doing something a long time, I've been using Photoshop for 20 years now, I'm kind of set in my ways of how I do things. So it's going to be a little difficult to try and incorporate this into my workflow, but we're going to give it a try and see how it goes. So I guess the next step is to get this thing set up to my computer, and we will go from there. So without any further ado, let's roll the intro. Alright, so here we are at the computer. I've got my Tourbox set up here on the left side. I've got my Wacom tablet and pen on the right side. And in the middle I've got my keyboard because I still use the keyboard a little bit. And I'm going to show you basically how to get this thing up and running and my suggestions on making the transition. So what you will see here when you pull up this Tourbox console, this is basically the software that you will use to set things on this controller. And as you can see, there's all these different buttons, and here down the right side is all the different tasks that correspond to the different buttons, and some of them are combinations of buttons. So I mean, there is a ton of different controls here. You'll notice that there's this little plus thing that you can put it wherever you want on your screen, and it corresponds to these buttons down here. And what these do is switch between your stamp tools, healing, brush, eraser. So you can kind of have these things fine-tuned to the different tools because you might use them slightly differently. What they are is basically a shortcut. So we can come over here and look at all these different things, and it's really easy to set things. For one thing, if you don't remember what something is, you can just hit it. You can hit the top button, and that tells you right here that that's basically for shift. Scroll button is for the zoom. Down here, this dial is for brush opacity. That's how I've got mine set. You can get these however you want. You can just hit this create new preset and name it whatever you want. Mine's just called Larry Test Preset because I'm kind of starting to move things around to get them exactly how I like them on the controllers. It's totally customized, which is nice because it allows you to be able to put things exactly where you want them. Like again, if you can't remember what something does, you hold it down and it tells you there on the right what they are. So that's kind of cool. And I'll show you, for example, let's say this rotary dial, when you press it, you can see I've got nothing set there right now. You can press it to bring that up, click on it, and then, like for example, I could put it to save as. So then anytime I press on this dial, it brings up the save as, so I can save something. So that's kind of handy. Now, again, with all these different things, it is about impossible to remember what all of them are. You know, it's kind of like, for those of you that use a Wacom tablet, when you first started using your tablet, how it was like trudging through heavy mud or something. You were moving slower than normal, it's kind of frustrating. And this is kind of the same way because you're so used to using, you know, the space bar on your keyboard or whatever your shortcuts that you use. And having them change to something else can drive you a little bit crazy. So what I recommend is this, because it is one of these things that as you start getting used to it, much like the tablet, it is kind of a more fun, easier way of doing things. It's just the learning curve that's a little problematic. So what I recommend you do is go through and just pick a few things at once. For example, I've got this up here to zoom in the image. So when we go like this, it's going to zoom her in and out. And so if nothing else, maybe you just start with that zoom and you've got this thing sitting on your desk and all you use it for is the zoom. Whenever you want to zoom in, you use that to zoom in and out. And then maybe from there you move up to, you know, I've got this over here as the space bar. So I can zoom in, move her around, zoom out, and you just get kind of used to doing those. And just slowly start adding a little bit at a time. You know, so for example, we've got our stamp tool as the down button. I can switch to the stamp tool, and I've got this button here set there as the sample. So let's say I wanted to zoom in a little bit here and just kind of clone out some of these stray hairs, for example. I could use this dial, get my brush a little bit bigger, make sure my opacity is where I want it at 100, that brush a little bit smaller, sample here, and swipe. And I could just go through, make it a little smaller, and just work with that. Whatever your workflow is. Drag her down a little bit. Right there. Just like that. So again, it's a matter of getting used to it and knowing where things are. And primarily what I'm using at this point is I use it for my brush controls. As you can see up here, once I get the brush how I want it, I can use this other wheel to bring down the opacity, which is kind of handy. Oh, I got going too fast. There we go. I use it like for the brush. I use it for that sampling and to move around. Those are primarily what I'm using it for right now is, like I said, the brushes and the zoom in and out feature. Again, if you want to, whoops, a little crazy there. Again, if you want to try that new feature we did, I just click this and it brings up the save as. So it really is kind of cool that you can go through and set this thing to do whatever you want. The problem is remembering where you've set things. So like I said, what I would recommend you do is, you know, start you a new preset, put things where you want them, and maybe just start with these things here, the space bar and the alt to make your selections, and go through and just pick different pieces to incorporate at one time. Like I said, you've got all these buttons, and I would recommend that you just do it piece by piece until you get to that you're using this thing as much as you think you need to use it. You'll probably find, I find that I don't use the keyboard nearly as much anymore. I still have to, obviously, if I'm naming a layer, I've got to type in the name and all that type stuff. I can't type on this. But as far as moving back and forth, I can have this thing going with my tablet and really get going really nicely with moving the brushes around, making the brush size up and down, opacity, and doing retouching and things. It really is nice. By the way, for those that do other things, like I also use Final Cut Pro to edit my YouTube videos, this will also work for that. And I'm doing the exact same thing on that platform. I'm slowly using it to bring in different tools as I learn. Now, the nice thing for me with something like Final Cut Pro is I'm very new to it, so I don't really have ingrained habits like I do in Photoshop. So if you're fairly new to Photoshop, you'll have a little bit easier time incorporating this because it'll just be kind of part of your learning curve. But that is basically how this works and how it works with that Tourbox console. Okay, so I've been using it for a couple of weeks now. What is the verdict on the Tourbox? Is it worth getting? Is it something you want to look into? And I think the answer to that kind of depends on your purposes. Is it something you absolutely need for your Photoshop workflow? Absolutely not. I did just fine for years with just the keyboard and the tablet. That being said, I think it does help speed up your workflow. It's one of those things that you're going to have a learning curve to get through it, but you're going to eventually pick up speed and find that it's actually easier to have all those things in one place rather than looking all over the keyboard for them. At least it was for me. If you have two uses for it, like let's say you do video editing in Final Cut Pro and you do Photoshop editing, then you're kind of getting double the benefit for your money, and I think that makes a lot more sense. It's not super expensive anyways. It's under $200. I think it's around 170 bucks. You can actually use the coupon code LarryPhoto to get a discount on it at their website, and I'll put a link to that down below as well. I'd love to know if any of you have started using this or a similar product and how it's been for your workflow. Did you go through that learning curve that I ran through? Or do you have maybe some suggestions on a better way of dealing with it? I really do believe that if you take it slowly and just slowly incorporate a few aspects at a time, you won't go through that super painful learning curve that you can have by just jumping in and going cold turkey with it. So that's my 2 cents on the Tourbox. I hope it was helpful, gives you a little bit of information one way or the other so you can decide whether it's something worth investing in for you. But that's all I've got for this video. I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Now, part of the problem with one of the